to another episode of the Critical Fools podcast. This is episode number 51. Can't believe we're already halfway to a century. Seems like we just started this podcast the other day. But anyway, for this week's episode, we will be reviewing Pig. This is a really recent film, a 2021 film, directed by Michael Sarnowski, and it stars Nicolas Cage. So, yeah, I had recently heard about this film from a friend of mine, and I saw it come out on Hulu. And I gotta admit, I was pretty impressed by this film. I saw the budget was only about $3 million. And I'm not sure if it actually came out into theaters, but it was definitely licensed to Hulu, which is how I watched it. And I gotta admit, I was pleasantly surprised. I think that Nicolas Cage kind of gets a bad rap because he's in so many movies. Some are great, some not as great. But I think this is one of the better performances I've seen from him in any film. So yeah, I just want to kind of get your initial thoughts, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, regarding Nicolas Cage, I just think that there's always examples of actors who just like they started in more of a goofy movies, and then, and I say even the movies, the National Treasure ones were kind of goofy. And like he's tried to transition out or like do other roles because but I think like I'm not an actor, but for everything I've been I've known and read over the years is like you ease, and it happens with many careers, right? You just get pigeonholed because certain directors or writers only see you in a certain role. But on the movie, yeah, I was also surprised. Like I had heard good things. Like I had seen some initial early reviews at the blogosphere, and I decided to watch it myself also during the holiday season, and I was not just surprised by his performance, but also like how it was Portland based. Okay, some of the surprises were kind of weird, but in general, I thought it was an interesting movie. With a lot of I think themes, but like themes that are not like just told to you. Kind of like you have to like soak it in from the movie, which I liked. I appreciated that.
Right. No, I definitely agree. I thought it was just a unique. It was such a kind of simple premise, where it's, and yet there's a lot that you sort of tease out or learn about the film because you're sort of thrown into Nicolas Cage's character, who's kind of a recluse. You can tell something really happened with him in his past, but you're not quite sure. But he's recluse with his pig that he just beloved so much, and so he lives out there in the middle of the Portland forest with his pig, who is really the best private foraging pig for truffles. And he sells those truffles, and that's kind of how he makes a living. So, because he's so reclusive and just out in the middle of nowhere, he somehow knows this sort of, I would say, the truffle buyer who's really well connected with the Portland scene, and he comes and basically gives him, supplies and other things in exchange for truffles. Because if y'all don't know, the truffles are very expensive. They're pretty sought after for the high end culinary scene, and so there's a big demand for them, and they're kind of hard to find if you don't have a really good truffle pig. So yeah, that's why I thought this was a surprisingly kind of simple premise, really, where it's like this guy has a pig, his pig gets stolen, and then he wants to go seek revenge and go find his pig. Pretty much at a very high level, that was what this movie was about. But they had a lot of much deeper things to at times in this movie. Is there anything else that really stuck out for you, or do you want to talk about any specific scenes?
Well, I was going to add on to your point that this movie is and that many movies do this, and many stories, like even novels, is it's crafted in the hero's journey type of framework, right? Like it's his and we'll get into maybe the little twist that maybe the little not twist, but deeper maybe message or topic to discuss towards the end of this film, because it's we'll get there. But yeah, you're right. It's a very simplistic premise in a sense, and it's crafted. That's the framework. And then they just fill in with what is the mission and goal, and what is the, the low point and the high point of the, his arc. And I think it's very compelling because I think there's a lot of human elements in his journey, right? Like you said, it just starts off with just kind of showing you his relationship with, you don't have any background, and you get little details, but you don't get the full picture even watching this film of like how, you know, he got to this particular point. Like you kind of like, they kind of discuss it in certain other side characters, but like you don't know, like we don't get these flashbacks that just show us, right? Like it's more through conversation and through kind of like
or certain actions too, especially
certain
like,
actions, yes.
where you start to understand some of like what Nicolas Cage's past is towards the beginning of the movie, where he listens to some of his tapes of his deceased wife's like recordings between him and her. And so that's when you kind of realize it's like, oh, okay, this is probably, or at least that's when it came to me. It's like, this is probably someone he lost. And that's probably what was part of the cause for him moving out into this remote area and living his reclusive lifestyle.
Yeah, and so I just want to like add on to your point that like, yeah, I agree that like the story structure is not overly complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I think it, you know, sometimes you can go overly too complex. I was going to start with like, what did you think of because it's not common, right? What did you think of the portrayal and the setting being Portland and Portland, Oregon?
It was interesting because it paints Portland's. If you've never been, it's a very interesting city, right? If you remember, in 2012 during the whole George Floyd protests with Black Lives Matter, they were the city that had I would say consistently the largest demonstrations.
Hold up, correction. You said 2012. George Floyd was 2012.
No, 20. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I said 2020.
Yeah, sorry.
My apologies for that. But yeah, so 2 years ago. Yeah, they had the largest, I think, consistent demonstrations of any city. And it's a very liberal city with a lot of weird traditions. Voodoo Donuts is a big spot there where they do a bunch of crazy things with donuts. So they do have interesting takes on the food scene. But honestly, the one thing I will say is I never necessarily, and this is probably my ignorance, viewed them as a huge culinary sort of, mecca in a way. When I think of top food cities, Portland doesn't necessarily come to mind. So it was interesting to have them use Portland as the setting for this film.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't read enough background to know like if there was a specific reason they chose Portland, but I did like the blend of like you said, how they capture how the city is, where it's built, but also like the natural aspect of it. Like we get to see not just like city life, but we also see like the communities around the city, right? That's where he's living. It kind of starts there. It goes into the city, then it goes back to nature in a sense. I don't know if that's by design, but I thought even part of the story mechanism that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, definitely. And if you've never been to the Pacific Northwest, they do have some gorgeous nature, and yeah, just really nice places in general. So I didn't have an issue with their sort of take of using Oregon. I mean, it's no,
I wasn't.
It's a beautiful state.
My question wasn't about it being an issue, but like the fact that it's not done often. Like I was just curious about like what your thoughts and stuff.
For Oregon, I mean, they do have like the show Portlandia, which is kind of a satire show on Oregon. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's not necessarily one of the more focal point cities or states generally when it comes to cinematography or filmmaking. So I don't have an issue with that. I imagine either the director or some of the writers had some experience in the Portland food scene or something like that really made them want to use the city as a focal point.
Yeah.
That's sort of would probably be my best guess, but I'm not sure. I haven't read enough about, the backgrounds of every single person who took part in this film. But yeah, are there any specific scenes that stuck out to you?
I mean, there's many, but before we go into any specific scenes, maybe we should like touch upon maybe the two most important characters, which in my opinion were Rob and Amir.
Of course.
And like we touched a little bit on Rob, but I wonder if we wanted to like talk about like, I guess what we thought of each character, what they kind of represented and like maybe to us, the viewer, and like then from there, I think we can talk about, because there's at least two or three scenes. I think.
What I will say is like, it's very interesting because you both get the idea that they kind of met because they're both part of the food scene. But one, like Nicolas Cage just lives this very reclusive lifestyle, and you could tell Amir, he's pretty well off. Also comes from a family that is well connected to the Portland food scene. He likes his. It's interesting seeing that they're very similar in some ways in terms of their background. They've been hurt in some ways. So like with Rob, he lost his family, like his wife and family, and that sort of caused him to be sad and move to the forest. With Amir, he had not a great past with his dad, and so he always felt like he was kind of hurt by that. So they've both been hurt in different ways. So they're similar in that way, and they're also connected to the food scene, but they also are sort of contrasted in that Nicolas Cage basically looks like a homeless person for most of the film, and Amir kind of like is wearing suits and he wears fancy watches. So you could see one cares about materialism, the other doesn't really, or doesn't need that, and yet they sort of meet and go on this journey together. And so they realize that they're different, but they're not so different. I think that was sort of the point with contrasting and comparing these characters. I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I thought you're on point. Like those two are, in my opinion, were the main characters of the story. Obviously, Rob is like the focal point, but like Amir, he becomes more and more of like a not passenger, but like a co-pilot of the story. Like you said, this father dynamic, which it does tie into the story. And like you said, even he himself, like he is like, again, they don't go into any explicit long monologues, but you sense what I got from his character was like sometimes the complexity of, of like relationships in terms of like the parental child and like how he's trying to make his own mark, but
he's trying to pave his own way, but he's overshadowed. Yeah,
because it's interesting how he's doing his own mark, but it's still in the field that his father knows. So it's not like, oh, you know what? I decided to not do food. I'm doing, I'm going to just say random industry.
Nuclear engineering.
Yeah, whatever. Marketing. I'm doing, I want to be like, a top lawyer. It's like, it's still this dichotomy of like, I want to make my own way, but I want to do it in, my father's backyard in a sense. It's like, it's hard for me to like psychoanalyze that because I don't have much experience myself with that, but because I work in entirely, all my parents don't know it, like don't understand what I do really, and so like they understand like what it is, but they don't understand like some of the details. Like they could have a conversation about like, hey, like you did this move there, like it was wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And they have those sort of conversations later, but like it's interesting in that regard. And like with Rob, it's like we learn through a lot of the side characters of like his story and how he used to be a super respected like chef. And
one of the top in the Portland food scene.
Where his name still like means something.
You can see it within the people in that field. It's this weight of honor, almost like you're meeting, like to us, like meeting Kobe or something like that. Like that's the level of respect or reverence that they have for him still. Yeah, it's very they definitely do well in showing that. And then like you learn, like you said, we piece together his own trauma, but like he's at a point of his life. Also, I think it's also a dichotomy of like age, right? Like I'm not, Rob's age yet, but one of those what's it called? Like social, like cultural knowledge is that like as you get older, you care less about like, what you wear all the time. Usually, I mean, I know that's not going to change. But what I mean is that like Amir's also like he's like even how he comes in the beginning of the movie with his flashy car, right? Like. And then like Rob has like the broken like truck. Like that was like you said, it's a good contrast, but also how like he just needs something that works. He doesn't really care because what to him the most valuable thing is the pig. Like that's that's his family. That's his life.
Yeah.
That's everything. That's his life. Well, not even so. It's not even his livelihood. I mean, he would just be completely alone if it weren't for that pig.
But yeah, I mean, so from there, I guess like, is there any specific scenes you wanted to? There's a few that I really liked. That I would like.
So there's one, but let's kind of segue. What's interesting is at one point, or like how you sort of jump in, right? I don't know if you really want to discuss. So what ends up happening is what kicks off really the film is the night his pig gets robbed, where he's asleep, you hear some noise, and a couple junkies end up taking his pig. And so that kicks off the catalyst where he gets knocked out, his pig gets taken. It's very sad. I was very sad to see his pig get taken in that shot. And then the next day, he sort of contacts him. Well, he tries starting his truck. His truck doesn't work. He ends up going to the diner and calls Amir. And then, because Amir is dependent on him because he's his truffle connect. So he needs him, right? Because that's how he makes his livelihood. They end up driving to Portland without a plan, except that Rob knows like a former chef in the food scene. And you go, you talk, and it doesn't really go well. And then Amir's like, well, okay, what the heck are we going to do now? He's like, don't worry, follow me. And then they go into the underworld where you have basically Fight Club for the food servers and chefs. It was a little far-fetched. Maybe there is. That is wild if there actually is that type of scene in some city somewhere. I wouldn't even know what to say. But I don't know. It was so unbelievable that might have been my one knock on the film too. But it sort of helps segue.
It just feels out of place because even because then that was so what's interesting is that like if there was like a little more of that world in the film, I would be like, okay, it's part of the structure of the movie. But it's like literally just that.
I think what it was meant to show was he will be willing to do anything, even getting the shit kicked out of him, in order to find what he loves or to fight for what he loves. I think that was more like what they were trying to do with that part of the film.
Still very bizarre, but yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just what they were going with it. And then that because he was willing to take a beating, the organizer of the event, I can't remember his name, ends up essentially like allowing. I'm trying to remember. Maybe I'm forgetting this. It does not like precede him to actually be able to go to a very high end restaurant, or am I missing something?
Yeah, he puts his name on the board. He gets into the he gets beat up, and then I think he just gets like a restaurant name. Because I think this is what leads to one of my favorite scenes where he talks to the chef that he used to know.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. So yeah, they end up. It's because he gets the name of the restaurant, and then Amir has to call in a favor and basically say he's like, my guest is going to be Rob. And then the dude who he talks to, who was like the butcher, was like, nah, he's like, there's no way I can get you. He's like, my guess is Rob. And the dude's like, all right, I can get you a reservation there. It was at Eurydice. And then they end up going to Eurydice. And I don't know if you want to talk about the scene first. So I'll let you take the floor.
I mean, it's one of my favorite scenes, right? He talks to, I forgot the character's name, but like, they serve the food and like, they eat it and it's all very like exquisite and fine. And he's trying to get information. And it escapes me like I think he ended up getting it, but like my favorite part was when he kind of talks to him saying like,
tells him to sit down.
Yeah, but more importantly, like I want to get into like I think the message of the scene in my opinion, but basically to recap it is like he breaks them down saying like, when you were young, you wanted to open basically an Irish pub version of a restaurant bar, right? What they call it, gastropub or whatever.
Yeah.
And like you're working and he pushes back like, well, yeah, but like that was a dream. Like this is like culinary high end, like this is the peak, right. And like Rob is just like, no, you should just cook what
it is you want to cook,
and like what makes you feel, what makes you like joy, passion. Like basically, why you got into the cook, like just if your passion is like, I think his message was like, if your passion is to do this, fine, but like he's like, I knew you, like your passion was not to do this, it was to he also takes a shot of his talent, but basically saying like you should do what you wanted to do, which was like that that Irish pub gastropub thing. And I think why I like that scene is because I think a lot of people get warped, not just when they're young, but also when they're older too. I think when you're young, you might have like, maybe you might think the ideal is like XYZ, and then like you get there and you realize it's not that great. But also I think also a lot of people, they just take like, middle management jobs, and they're just content because it, pays the bills, and they don't think about it anymore. Like they lost that passion they once had in their youth. And like I found this scene very like, without the show, like I'm a big fan of like a show not tell, and I thought it was very poignant. Like like he basically saying like, why are you not opening your own,
I think he was saying he's like don't fall into
yeah.
to go off of that. I think he was trying to convey he's like don't go off of what other people's expectations are for success. Do what it is that you find passion in, and go with that because that's going to be the most rewarding.
Yeah,
I was like, that's not bad because seeking from validation from others just never really brings about your own happiness. So I thought that was one of the more powerful scenes in the film for sure. They had some really good dialogue moments in this movie. And we can get to some of the others like later on as well. But so they end up going from that point, and I'm trying to remember. I don't remember exactly. Or is there another scene that you would want to talk about that stuck to you?
Well, I think there's the scene after this is like they so I think he gets some information he wanted. This is like it's a hero's journey thing, but there's also like a puzzle aspect to it. I forgot what information he gets, but I do know that like soon after Rob, like doesn't he go to his where his wife used like their house they used to live in?
The house, and you see the child
because he wanted to pick up something, right? Is this where he picks up did he pick up the wine bottle now or later?
I think later.
Okay, later. But like he does go to the house.
No, he might go to like the basement of the house or something like that. I can't remember.
Because basically in this movie, for our audience, like every scene, even though it doesn't look important, you learn at the end like there was a reason he needed to go to certain locations, right? Sometimes it was to get information about the pig, but it looks like, I mean, we'll get to the ending, or the last stretch, which is like I think the most interesting. But he's like, it was always in his plan, maybe to have to do.
No, I take it back. He gets the wine bottle from the mausoleum.
Okay.
Do you remember he goes to visit his wife's mausoleum?
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah, and he has to, and it's like I remember it's like these are like reserved for him, right? Yeah, I remember. That. But I forgot why he goes to Is it just like maybe it's just how we get the background of like why he withdrew from society, the wife's death? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's when you figure it out. And you also like it's around this time, and I can't remember exactly when, that you find out that about Amir's parents like passed, and he talks about how he's like it was never really a happy childhood. They were always kind of fighting and bickering. He's like, but I remember one day night, he's like they come back home. Right, and they were joyous, talking about how great the food was, the experience. He's like, that was the one time I saw them truly happy, and that was the one time where they went to go eat at your restaurant. And that's when everything starts tying together a lot on this film. I was like, okay, well, like I could see like where this film's going. I was like, and I thought it was really well crafted.
Yeah. Sorry. So the restaurant scene that we were just talking about leads to the revelation that it's Amir's father that took the pig. That's why it's different. Right. That scene's important. Yeah, so you're right. And then you're right. There is that scene. I can't time it because this movie is not really. It's linear, but like how I remember the movie isn't. And like you're right. There is that scene with the like that is a good scene too, and it shows like it's funny. It shows what I told. I was on a date early in the year, and I said that like I was asked like what's my favorite food, and I said like it's actually more about like the memory of the moment than it is about the food.
The experience.
Because food is food, right? Like it's good food. Obviously, there's a difference, but like if you have a good food, you eat it by yourself every day. Like how enjoyable is that really? Like, part of like restaurant dining and having good meals is like it's about the people you're with and like your friends and like you said the experience. But experience not just like I'm in a nice restaurant, but also like. Because like I say, I could go to a restaurant right now, eat by myself every day. I'm not gonna do that because that's pretty like you could do it maybe once to try something out, but like it's gonna be a miserable experience, after a while.
I remember the food being very good when we were at this. I can't remember the specific or like you saying that in mind kind of triggered why I thought of this. But when we were in New Orleans for Mardi Gras years ago, and we went to go eat at some restaurant near the French Quarter. The food was good. We had like jambalaya, but it was the fact that with the company we were and the jokes that were being cracked, one of the most memorable experiences, dining wise. And so, like to your point, you're right. Like you can have good food, but you need to couple that with sort of the atmosphere and dynamic.
Yeah. So like I said, the credit to the movie, show rather than tell. But like, I think when that, like you say, when you're describing that scene, I think a lot of people can connect with like, yeah, I remember like I was at a, wedding and like actually the meals were great. And the moment was like, because that moment only happens in that moment in time, right? Like you can't recreate
you can't recreate it.
So yeah, I think that again, this movie has a lot of like
Little things.
humanistic scenes that I think like give it points. It's not gonna get points for like, overly overt like plot line, but like it's definitely
it's also the way that you don't like this movie gives you the feeling that it was all vengeance. This is not going to end well. But you do towards the end, like you realize it doesn't end well in some ways, and yet the way it's handled, the ending was just so. I didn't quite expect it, and it was so well wrapped together that I was like, wow, like I was really pleasantly surprised by this film.
Yeah, when we get to the ending, I love my one-liners, so I have one about.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, to me, the ending. I do want to talk about some other scenes.
But like, what did you think about like? Because he basically they muscle together. They get all of the ingredients for like a meal. And you don't know. I thought there was going to be like a violent revenge at the end of the meal or something like that, and then you realize no, this was how it ends. Is basically Nicolas Cage cooks a dinner with Derek and Amir, and then Derek eats the food, and he breaks down crying, and and the reason he breaks down crying and he becomes humanistic was because that triggered the memory because that was a same meal that Derek had with his wife on like probably their best date ever, and so then he starts to like it reveals that his pig died. Because the junkies he hired to take it were just reckless, and it didn't survive.
And what's crazy is that the full circle, we meet those junkies in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so they don't reveal at the time that basically because they probably knew that the pig was dead. Because Amir's father says like, hey, like no, by the time the pig got to me, it was dead, unfortunately. But what I wanted to say was that one thing we glossed over on, like I think not by on purpose, is that Amir's mother. I don't think it's ever said, but it's basically implied that she tried to commit suicide, but she's in the hospital in the coma. And that could be indefinite, unfortunately. But yes, when that is revealed, that's the big reveal of the movie, is that like you have gone through this journey with Rob, and you always doubt like, is the pig alive? If it's dead, it might be alive because you might think he wants the truffle thing, but you just don't know. Because earlier in the movie, I forgot Amir's father's name. Do you happen to know it? I think there was a scene earlier. Derek earlier threatens Rob with like, if you keep pursuing this, I'm just killing the pig with a phone call.
Yep.
Which is interesting, is that he knows the pig's already dead. So I also find that interesting that like a lot of points in this film, certain characters know the pig's dead already, and it's not revealed to Rob. So, but he goes through this journey with Amir, confronting his past in many ways because he has to visit that a few like old, let's call them old like friends. Like I know he visits where he gets the wine, but also where he gets the bread from that I forgot that woman's name, but he gets the baguette from a baker, right? And that really, and actually that also a little implication of like how a relationship from a chef and also the resources to to make a meal like a baker or whatever is actually important, because he goes to her specifically because he wants this to be really like I said, a really good top class meal, and supposedly it is. But yeah, so like we'll get into like the final scenes, but when that's revealed to me, it started clicking in my brain like retrospective, like wow, certain characters like Derek, like the junkies knew, and maybe others as well. Maybe they knew, maybe the underground world knew. Who knows who knew? But like let's say at least two characters for sure knew when they saw Rob the first time that the pig was dead. And it was interesting how like they didn't reveal that. And so you as the audience, right, you're led to believe too that there's like, we don't know how this is going to end, right? Is it violently? Is it whatever? But like you keep going on this journey. And to me, this ending was very symbolic of like a famous cliche, like, it's about the journey, not the destination. And like, there's this little debate at the end about like, would you have rather known or not, which I'm curious to get your take on. But I found that whole interesting because the film kind of encapsulates like, because you're with Rob like the whole way, like, oh, like the pig alive is a pig. And then you realize, oh, wow, the pig was dead like minute 12 like of this film. Like this film could have been like 20 minutes long if it was just revealed to you. So it's also like, I'm happy I didn't read any like spoilers or knew like how this movie.
Right. I know. I totally agree with you. Yeah. And in many ways, this is kind of like So you don't know if the pigs that are alive is kind of like Schrodinger's pig. If you want to put it that way. Like it's neither dead nor alive until you figure out the exact state. It's always a sort of hope or this idea that that the pig is alive during most of the film. It's not until the end. You're right, because like the pig died probably a few hours after that struggle. But the whole time you're spent looking for the pig. And yeah, it was interesting. The sort of that knowledge in retrospect when you're like watching the film, but you don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that are kind of like that, where it's like it's not true until you find out the exact outcome.
And so this is probably lead to an interesting conversational topic, because there is that scene with Rob and Amir about like, because Amir's like the naive young guy, or like, would you have rather have not known or known? Mm-hmm. And like that, I'm curious about what was your take about that, because that to me is another good scene. It's like they talk like you said, they touched upon what you just said. Like, is the knowledge worth it or not worth it? You know.
I mean, I guess it depends on your frame of reference. I mean, this actually kind of reminds me more of the philosophical film that we reviewed. Remember Stalker, where it's like they wanted to go into the door of knowledge or not, but then they have a huge sort of debate about it and what that would mean if they actually entered that, and they'd rather be in the state where they don't know. And so, like, because it might not be all that they live up to be. And what if it's just like that? So they'd rather live with the hope. And I guess, like, hope is a very powerful thing for people. So I would say not knowing is probably what most people would want.
Yeah, because that scene is like, when it's not like, I don't think it could be in the synopsis because it's a very subtle scene, but I found it really powerful where it's like they're having a conversation about like, yeah, would you rather have known, like, well, he ended up knowing, right? Like it's dead, it's final. Or would you have rather have thought like, okay, it's lost, I have no idea. Like he could be dead, he could be, like, that doubt is like I said, it's hope and doubt are a very fickle line, right? And like he could have easily thought like, okay, maybe if you're cynical, like you could think, oh, okay, it died, I couldn't find the pig. But you also might think like, oh, okay, maybe he just, he's just being used by somebody else, and like I'm just never gonna see my pig again. It's like it reminds me of like people maybe back in the day before like instant communication, of like when they saw their family members like travel to the new like America back, like and they just, if they didn't get a letter, they just assumed they just lived there and hopefully had another life. But for all you know, they died on the boat, right? Like you have no idea.
Sure, there was a lot of that at that time.
Yeah, and so it's like one of those things where it's like, do you rather not know? It made this movie, and then I appreciate this movie because it made me think. Because like I'm somebody who was always pushed for knowing, even at my own personal cost, whether that's like knowledge, whether that's like relationships. I mean, you know me for a long time. Like I've always leaned that side. But this movie made me think about maybe on the other side, people who are like more hesitant, like rather like have the fantasy than the reality. Like this movie made me think about like I can see the appeal, because this story is so like emotional, where it's like I can see the appeal of like having the fantasies better than like, no, okay, the pig dead.
Well, but then there's also, I mean, you've read your fair share of the Bible. We both went to Catholic school. What's one of the first stories there? Be careful of eating from the tree of knowledge, because it has its own consequences too.
Yeah, well, I read Genesis in a different way, so.
Well, biblical stories do have certain meanings that speak to humans.
That's true, but how I read the Genesis is well, I don't want to get into that right now.
No, now I'm curious. Well, wait, where are you going with that?
No, I mean, I agree with, as I get older, I agree a little more with the interpretation of, sometimes knowledge can be hurtful, but I also think that
certain kinds.
You could also argue in a more postmodern way that like especially the Old Testament, was a way for like the status quo to make sure they maintain control of the populace. Like if you don't know, it's because honestly, if I'm an elite in a society, don't question me. Like you don't want to know what's behind the scenes, right? But if you're about transparency, sometimes you got to learn the hard truths.
Sure, it's kind of a retrospective analysis, but okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's who are you talking to, dude? I love looking at things at different angles. But it's but no, this film has tugged in a thread in my mind about like, sometimes it is better letting go. Like maybe you don't need to know if this like whatever, like this pig is alive or dead, or you don't need to know if like this person hates you or likes you, or it's sometimes I see that movie made me realize that I can see the appeal, but that has not been how I lived my life so far. So like I've always been like,
appreciate that it made you see a different perspective.
Exactly. So again, bonus to the movie because I was just like, okay, I see it. Like I because I was when they're having this conversation, I was on the side like, no, I want to know the pig is dead. Okay, at least I know. Like, okay, I
Not
hope
when
he's
it's
dead,
something
but
that ties to you so emotionally.
it's still. I feel like it's a bit. I lean towards it's just better to know, and then like you can process your grief and face the truth that way.
Sure, sure. I mean, this is where it gets very debatable.
I know, I agree. It's debatable. I think it's about like just life perspective and your life experiences perspective. It's like I go to the doctor because like I get skin screening because like I rather know if I have skin cancer or not. Like I rather not just like ignore it.
Yeah,
Like
sure. Yeah, I mean, it's there's some people who just live in their whole life in denial, and that's not good either.
But to your point, I did see like sometimes for certain things, like maybe it's not worth putting yourself through that emotional torture. So again, kudos to the film.
It depends. Yeah, I mean, it was just good. Like that's the whole thing. This is such a simple story, and yet like it touched like certain ways where I was like, I wasn't quite expecting that, or it tied in certain things that I wasn't expecting. So I mean, kudos because like I thought that it was a pretty tight, well done script for this movie.
Yeah. Okay, I think the final stretch of this film is basically a mere. Oh, that's before we get into the final stretch. I thought it was interesting
but that was the other thing I liked. It was tied in where they go on this journey, and you realize Nicolas Cage tells you, he's like, dude, and he tells Amir, he's like, dude, I don't need the pig. He's like, I know.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. Yeah,
go like by myself. And then he's like, we went on this journey for what? And he's like, well, it's because that pig was basically my family.
Yeah, the pig was like a helper, but he was the one that was able to.
Yeah,
he had all the skills.
It was hunting grounds and things like that.
Yeah, like he knows how to. He's the one that his expertise is really up here, not the pig. Yeah, even though everybody thought it was the pig. Yeah,
right. And so like that's when you realize it was just the emotional connection that he had with the pig.
Yeah, it was his last friend, and now Amir could be his friend. That's what I'm going with. I thought the ending was nice when they he washes his face in the lake and then he plays the tape from his deceased wife, and I think it's a song, right? I don't know what the song was.
Yeah, she's singing.
You're the music. You're the music.
No, well, I can remember the exact song. It's been probably about 2 months since I've seen this movie, but just reading the ending of the synopsis, yeah, it was Bruce Springsteen's "I'm on Fire" that he had for his birthday. So I thought it was yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. I thought it was a good film. It was not something. It wasn't some overly complicated, and it was so deep in some ways. So I did appreciate this about the movie. It was like a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, this movie.
You read the synopsis about a forger who's looking for his lost truffle pig. It's like, really? That's interesting. And then like you watch the movie, it's like, oh, that's some things definitely stick with you.
Yeah, this movie. Well, again, like I had heard good things. I keep my eye to the my ear to like
your ear to the ground.
Yeah, my ear to the indie scene. So like I heard good things about this project and like
it didn't disappoint to me.
Yeah, it was really good. I thought this film captured a lot of like, I think a lot of themes that we don't often discuss, like just the fact about like, would you rather know or not know? Like that was interesting. Also like how information, if you had learned something earlier, can change the outcome of events. Like, and I think it's easy. I think one can reflect on their own life about like if they learned something earlier, or, I'm not going to do a plug for my side podcast, but it's
more like is the journey worth it?
Yeah,
like, it was another part of it.
But also like retrospection. So I liked retrospection a lot. So like I thought this movie was, when that was revealed, you can easily retrospect on the movie, like what all those like events and sequences that could have been.
Sure, but retrospective analysis has its own downfalls too.
Yeah, because you can overanalyze, but you
can overanalyze, and sometimes it's like the wrong interpretation in some ways.
Yeah, well, it's interpretations. Yeah, it's up to it's up to you. But yes, it was pretty good. I don't know if we want to get into ratings, but I will say
we can get into ratings. It's about that time. I mean, there's nothing else to like super analyze in this film. I think we've covered most of the important parts. So yeah, I'll let you go first since I'm the one who picked this film.
Yeah, I thought this film was really good. I liked it. I'm actually not a Nicolas Cage hater. I actually think he's
pretty good. He's got some good films.
But even the films that are like, the fun ones, like they're fun. Like they're not bad. It's not like he's like terrible. It's not like we're watching like, a really bad actor doing like, a movie, So yeah, I thought it was like really a well-crafted story. I thought thematically it was unique. The premise was unique. Portland, the setting is even unique. I don't see many films based in Portland.
Mhm.
I think the downside I felt with the film was mainly around the scene didn't bother me too much, but like I thought like there would be maybe more scenes like that, or at least a little bit. Like it was just like that, and then I was like, oh, that's it. That's all we're getting of abnormal abnormalities. I would have liked to see a little more background on like the deceased wife, but that's just a nitpick in my opinion. So for me, I give the movie a 8.5 out of 10. To me, it's a very solid film. You know, I don't view rewatchability as high as I think you do. So to me, it's like this movie is not
I'll watch this film again.
Well, the problem is that like I don't think you can get the same kind of experience because of like
No, yeah, you already know.
Yeah, but like that's the uniqueness. I'm so glad I did not like just even read the synopsis or anything.
Well, the synopsis was just literally.
I would definitely rewatch this with other people and have those conversations like we're doing now. But like it's not one of those films where it's like I can recreate. Like I can watch certain like not the new trilogy, old trilogy, and remember like my childhood. I can still create that magic from.
It doesn't have the nostalgia factor because
yeah. But also like I just I can recite lines and stuff. It's like that doesn't have but I don't value rewatchability that much. I can see myself watching this film when I want to see it with like somebody who hasn't seen it. But
I can probably watch it again. I can watch this over and over and over.
Yeah, that's the key.
That is too much. But yeah, no, I really like the. I will say, I like the premise was simple enough. I mean, it's a typical story structure, like you were saying, with the hero's journey. But I thought the pace was really good in this film. Like it felt a little suspensey at times, like because you're just trying to find out what happened to the pig, and so it was pretty upbeat in the pace, which I liked. I never thought it was slow, really, at any point in this film. I do agree with you. I do think that the fight scene was a little out of place. I mean, they wanted to make it like Chef's Fight Club in a way, which was a little weird. But to the point, I think they were just trying to, I would say my interpretation of that was they were just trying to show that, Nick Cage, aka Rob, will do whatever it takes, even having himself, having the living crap kicked out of him, to do whatever it takes to find his pick. I thought that there were some very deep sort of conversations in this movie that we've touched upon quite a bit, which I did enjoy. It didn't make it that it was just a basic generic kind of like movie storyline. I thought the acting from Amir and Rob was fantastic in this movie. I thought they did a really good job selling their roles and sort of what their vulnerabilities of the characters, what they were. And yeah, there's not a whole lot I could necessarily complain about. I would say rewatchability isn't super high, but I don't think that was necessarily the point of this film. So for that, I give it a 9.
Nice. A 9 from you that's a big score.
This up there. Anyway, yeah. So that's it for this week's commentary on the movie Pig. If you enjoyed our commentary and analysis on this film, please like and subscribe to our channel. And if you have any suggestions on the films you would like us to review, just please let us know in the comment section, and we will get to them. So anyway, stay tuned until next week, and we're out.